Hi. The first book I read this month is Lives of the Munster Dogs by Kirsten Bacchus, which was first published in 1998. It was republished in 2017 by FSG to celebrate its 20th anniversary, and I think that edition has an introduction by Jeff Vandermeer. This cult classic came onto my radar just a few weeks ago, and I immediately ordered it from the library because, I mean, look at the cover. It has a dog with human hands dressed in a coat, so how could I not? Once I picked the book up from the library, I read the first 20 or 30 pages and actually almost put it down. There were a couple pages of animal torture, which I did know to expect, but I wasn't sure how much would be in the rest of the book, and the prose and story, at least to that point, while decent, weren't really hooking me. But I decided to continue on, and I'm glad I did. The premise of the book is that a group of elegant Munster dogs, dressed in Germanic mid 1800s finery, become instant celebrities when they suddenly arrive in New York in 2008. The dogs are refugees from a town that had been completely isolated for 100 years in northern Canada. The dogs are very wealthy, but stuck in a time that has long since passed. A young woman named Kalpa Imperial strikes a friendship with one of the dogs and discovers that a strange, incurable illness threatens them all with extinction. The premise of the book is really intriguing, and there are some quite lovely and striking sentences throughout, but I think overall the plot is marred by a few mistakes that many first time authors make. For instance, Bacchus spends a good portion of the book explaining not only the existence of the dogs, but how their mad genius creator came into existence, which itself was filled with pretty typical tropes. For instance, the creator was abandoned by his father, had a mother who died when he was very young, and he enjoyed a hobby of animal torture as a child. And really for the rest of his life. There wasn't anything I found particularly interesting about this mad science character, and he didn't feel necessary to the rest of the story other than as an explanation for why the dogs existed, which I really thought the book didn't need. I think the scientist could have remained a mythical figure. Another trope that I was disappointed in was that the main character, Pia, is of course beautiful but doesn't know it. The only reason she is able to enmesh herself within the dog's society is because one of the dogs passes her on the street and then stops because she is so beautiful. More specifically, she happens to bear a striking resemblance to a gorgeous woman he owns a painting of. What made this especially maddening is that there is a section that is perfect for introducing Pia to the dog that she meets on the street. That would have made more sense, I think, and also would have been much more interesting. One last criticism before I get to the compliments. I hate when authors write a book with wildly futuristic elements just like barely in the future. This book has laser guns, which were very off putting additions, and people wear metallic hats as a fashion statement. If an author is going to transform society in weirdly futuristic ways, then place the story at least 100 years or so away from the present. I think that placing this book just 20 years after it was written seems like a weird choice. Now onto the good things. Like I said, the premise is very interesting, and I think that Bacchus did a really fine job of writing the dog characters. They were very diverse in their motives and personalities, and the conversations between characters was really nicely done. I could always tell who was speaking. There's a gothic quality to this novel, and so I really enjoyed this combination of gothic elements and sci-fi elements. I think she did that really well. The primary message that I got from this book, if Bacchus was meaning to present any message, came through loud and clear to me, and yet was also quite nuanced. I think at its core, the book is about appearances. These dogs that walk on two legs, aided by either a cane or umbrella, can talk. They have human hands, which are perpetually finely gloved, and dress to the nines. They call themselves monsters, but are never seen by humans as other than glamorous or mysterious. These are beings that are so ready to see themselves as monstrous that a large number of them cannot see themselves as anything but that. Because of their glamour, but despite the fact that they escaped the small town they were kept captive in by murdering all the humans of New York are rarely, if ever, afraid of them. When people inflict violence on or kill other people, we very often do the same thing. If somebody looks respectable or is a celebrity, we have a very hard time seeing them as guilty. But if someone, no matter the circumstances or if they actually did it or not, hurts or kills someone and does not fit our idea of respectable, essentially, whatever is familiar to us, then we immediately assume they committed the crime and or did so for the basest of reasons. For some people, we give the benefit of the doubt as to motive or guilt, and for others, we do the opposite. I'm quite sad that Bacchus never published another novel, as I would love to follow her evolution as a writer, but maybe and hopefully she will someday. Overall, if the premise intrigues you, I suggest you give this one a try and let me know what you think. So I read another book by Sylvia Townsend Warner, kind of on a Warner kick. The book is called Mr. Fortunes Maggot, which interestingly has been shortened to Mr. Fortune for the New York Review Books edition, which contains both this novel and the follow-up novel, which I have not read, The Salutation. Mr. Fortune's Maggot is about a London bank clerk turned minister who has set his heart on serving a remote volcanic island called Fanua. Fanua? I don't know how to pronounce it. But it's a made-up island, so I guess I can pronounce it however I want. Mr. Fortune is told that the island is inhabited by childlike and immoral children. Ugh, yikes. After 3 years, Mr. Fortune has made only one convert, a young boy named Llewellyn, and his devotion to the boy is probably, but never explicitly told, to be more sensual than sacred. FYI, a maggot is a whimsical fancy. I didn't just know that. I read the whole book not knowing what it meant, and then I had to look it up before I did this video. I was a bit afraid to read this book because I was worried that it would be very much of its time, which it is, but I found it to be, at least from my very white Western worldview, mostly inoffensive, and one of the messages of the story is about the stupidity and utter ridiculousness of colonization. The island of Fanua is fictional, and I think Warner wrote it to be impossibly idyllic as I comment on Westerners' fantasies of faraway islands. I actually ended up finding this book to be just a tad superior to Warner's Lowly Willows, but that is probably just a matter of taste and personal preference. There was, as usual, some really gorgeous imagery, and one part of the book actually made me cry. As per the other two books by Warner I've read, this one is held together more by atmosphere than plot, which is very much my cup of tea. I read a review on Goodreads that made me both laugh and groan, so let me read it to you. For some reason, I had gained the impression that Sylvia Townsend Warner was a good writer, now enjoying a modest revival. On the basis of this novella, however, I was misinformed. Not a strong narrative, therefore, but that is not essential. How about a study of character and relationships? Colonial missionary smitten by native youth with faith-testing consequences? Not in this book. Mr. Fortune is more puppet than person. Why does he become a missionary? Because Sylvia Townsend Warner says so. Llewellyn, the local boy, gets even shorter shrift, being given less character than the average fictional dog. So, I think a lot of people who read a lot of books sometimes do this. That is, begin reading a book, quickly decide it's bad, and then finish it out of spite so that you can make an educated statement about your hatred. I don't know, maybe this guy gave this book a fair shot, but I'm gonna go with my theory on this one because it's more fun. To combat his opinion, I thought that Mr. Fortune's point of view was the dominant one because that is how Westerners tend to view the rest of the world. We do actually get one very short paragraph from Llewellyn's perspective a little past halfway through the book, and it's quite humorous. He's basically just thinking, guess I gotta take care of this guy again. Like in a loving sort of way, like when you need to help your grandma with a task on the computer you've walked her through 10 times already. And I think his opinion that Mr. Fortune is more puppet than person is... Wow. Warner is a subtle writer, so you do need to pay attention when you're reading her work. He has a lot of inner monologues we get to partake in. Anyway, here is an especially lovely portion of the book. This is not the section that made me cry. I had to write the whole thing down because I don't have the library book anymore. Hopefully I can read my handwriting. I'd had a poor, meager, turnpike sort of life until I came here and found Llewellyn. I loved him. He was a refreshment to me, my only pleasant surprise. He was perfect because he was a surprise. I had had no hand in him. I could no more imagined him beforehand than I could have imagined a new kind of flower. So what did I do? I started interfering. I made him a Christian, or thought I did. I taught him to do this and not to do the other. I fidgeted over him, and because I loved him so for what he was, I could not spend a day without trying to alter him. How dreadful it is that because of our own wills, we can never love anything without messing it about. We couldn't even love a tree, not a stone even, for sooner or later we should be pruning the tree or chipping a bit off the stone. Yet if it were not for a will, I suppose we should cease to exist. Anyhow, it is in us, and while we live, we cannot escape from it. So however we love, and whatever we love, it can only be for a few minutes, and to buy off our will for those few minutes, we have to relinquish to it for the rest of our lives whatever it is we love. Llewellyn has been the price of Llewellyn. Yes, parrot. He's talking to a parrot right now. You may well whistle, but be careful. Don't attract my attention too much, lest I should make a pet of you, and put you in a cage, and then in the end, when you had learned to talk like me instead of whistling like a wise bird, wring your neck because you couldn't learn to repeat Paradise Lost. Read it. So the next book I read was Kalpa Imperial, The Greatest Empire That Never Was. It is by the Argentinian writer Angelica Gerodischer, and this edition was translated by Ursula Le Guin, who wrote many books, but is probably best known for her Earthsea series. I didn't know until picking this up that she also translated several works during her life. This book is a collection of short stories in the vein of the Arabian Nights. Each story is narrated by an unnamed storyteller. The storyteller's voice and the theme of empire link the stories together and are told not in any order I can discern. The tent from which the storyteller tells their tales feels like a bubble outside of time, where those who are weary from travel or the travails of day-to-day life may take a moment to rest. The stories themselves also have a timeless quality, as they all take place in a country with ever-changing names and rulers, each forgotten and then remembered and forgotten again. In one story, there may be a mention of dirt roads and small clay homes, and in another, cars and planes make a brief and easily missed appearance. There is no telling where these stories take place because they could take place anywhere and nowhere at all. They are more fable than story, more commentary on empire and power, and the connectedness of all things, even those people and things that have been forgotten entirely ages ago. Everything is tangled together, and to pick at one string would be to unravel the whole thing. Many of the characters have fabulous names, such as Regnavon, son of Regnavavon, Odin Barsail, the Bloodthirsty, and my favorite, Ebelgerd the Corpse. To give you a taste of the prose, I'll just read the first page. The storyteller said, "Now that the good winds are blowing, now that we're done with days of anxiety and nights of terror, now that there are no more denunciations, persecutions, secret executions, and whim and madness have departed from the heart of the empire, and we and our children aren't playthings of blind power, now that a just man sits on the golden throne, and people look peacefully out of their doors to see if the weather's fine and plan their vacations, and kids go to school, and actors put their hearts into their minds, and girls fall in love, and old men die in their beds, and poets sing, and jewelers weigh gold behind their little windows, and gardeners rake the parks, and young people argue, and innkeepers water the wine, and teachers teach what they know, and we storytellers tell old stories, and archivists archive, and fishermen fish, and all of us can decide, according to our talents and lack of talents, what to do with our lives. Now anybody can enter the emperor's palace, out of need or curiosity. Anybody can visit that great house which was for so many years forbidden, prohibited, defended by armed guards, locked and as dark as the souls of the warrior emperors of the dynasty of the Eli Dravids." That was all one sentence, which says a lot about the quality of the prose. It has this very floating, lyrical quality to it. So if that first page sounded good to you, give it a try. So if any of this piqued your interest, give the book a try and let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. Bye.